My case was really severe. It was pretty bad. I mean, I struggled with everything under the sun. I mean, everything you could possibly struggle with when you have DPDR. I remember falling to the floor and just like crying and like just begging God, like, why me? Why me?
It feels impossible to even dare to believe that you could get back to normal. Because people will say, but like, I can't even remember what being normal felt like.
You don't really remember what normal feels like till you're normal again, if that makes sense.
Is it actually possible to really recover?
Yeah, absolutely. It's possible. Like I'm an example, completely an example. And like I've accomplished so much since I've been better. Know that in time, as you just start to live your life again, that you're gonna feel normal again and you're gonna be happy again and you're gonna feel all those feels because it is temporary.
Hey everyone, I'm Sean O'Connor, creator of the Depersonalization Manual, and today I'm speaking with Marianne Manning, who you may recognize from 2 previous recovery interviews, and this is one of the most important follow-up interviews I've ever done on this channel. Marianne is fully recovered from depersonalization and derealization. The last time we spoke, she had been recovered for about 6 months. Now, she's been recovered for over 2 years. And since we last spoke, her life hasn't just continued to return to normal, it's moved forward in ways that once felt completely impossible. She's finished her GED, started college studying criminal justice, and has just been hired as a police officer. She's now preparing to begin her time at the police academy. I want to underline that because when Marianne was in DPDR, functioning at this level, handling responsibilities, pressure, decision-making, and stress didn't just feel unachievable, it didn't even feel realistic. It felt completely out of reach. This conversation isn't about managing depersonalization or learning to live with it. It's about what happens after it's gone, with real distance from the fear, the hyper-awareness, and the constant self-monitoring. We'll talk about the core fears that drove Marianne's DPDR, the moment she stopped trying to feel normal and started living her life, the things she used to obsess over that she no longer thinks about at all, and what anxiety and DPDR look like now in the rearview mirror when it no longer controls her life. So if you're watching this and thinking, my case is different, or I'll never feel like myself again, or do people really recover long-term 100%? This interview is for you. It will show you what time, patience, and a settled nervous system can actually do. This is what complete long-term recovery looks like. So let's get into it. Marianne, you're very welcome back to the channel. It's great to see you again.
It's great to see you too, Sean.
So viewers of the channel will recognize you from our 2 previous interviews. So the first time we spoke was not too long after you had recovered. The last time we spoke would have been 6 months later. And here we are, a full 2 years after your recovery. So what's been happening?
A lot. I went back to school, got my GED, and then I decided I wanted to go to college to study for criminal justice. And while I was studying for criminal justice, I decided that I wanted to be a police officer. I just had like this calling. So for me, I never thought I could do it. And I just started applying at different departments and, learning the process of how to become a police officer. And I've been going through that process, and I just got an offer letter the other day from a department, and I am still weighing my options. I still have one more department that is considering hiring me after I take my physical fitness test next Monday. So that's where I'm at.
Wow. And are these departments in Kentucky?
So one is in Kentucky and one is in New Hampshire, where my mom lives.
Okay. So it would involve you having to move. Is that correct?
If I decided to take the one in New Hampshire where my mom is, yes, that would be me picking up my life and moving. Yes.
Wow, that's fantastic. And really exciting to hear all these new opportunities and challenges ahead of you that I know would have felt fairly unrealistic back in the time when you had DP and DR.
Oh, sure did. Never, ever did I ever imagine I would be right here right now in life.
let's look back at that experience with the distance of 2 years, because I know there's going to be people watching this who think, I can't even imagine. I can't even imagine a day without this. Not to mind a couple of months, not to mind years. So I think it's really good to speak to somebody who has that distance, and we can talk about that perspective. So Marianne, when you think back to your worst DPDR moments, what was the main fear that was driving all that? And how do you see that fear now? How do you think about DP and DR now with 2 years recovery behind you?
Um, so when I was going through it, my main fear, obviously, like everybody else, is like I'm stuck like this for the rest of my life. It's taken my life for me. I'm never going to be the same. Um, yeah, just that my life was over, basically. Like I didn't understand where it was coming from and why I was having it. Um, and that it's just took my life for me, and I never thought that I would be normal again. Hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Such a common fear, and it's also for me and for a lot of people I speak to, most of the people I speak to, it's the it's a deep sense of frustration and sadness as well that
Oh, super sadness. Yeah.
yeah, because it's like your ability to do the simplest things is now impaired. Like going down to the shop to get a loaf of bread felt like it was like
Worst.
going to Mordor, like, and it just,
Mhm.
and then not to mind the things that you actually wanted to do in your life in terms of your long-term goals, career changes, traveling, all the rest of it, all that feels completely impossible. And
You
for me,
base your plans basically around your DPDR. Like for me, like I would be like, oh my God, I want to go drive here and visit this person. And you're like, well, no, I can't do that because I have DPDR and it's not going to let me do that. So I found myself basically basing everything in my life and my plans around not leaving my house because I was scared to.
and these are called patterns of avoidance. It, anxiety tells you you can't do this, or it's dangerous for you to do this. You could end up hurt, or you could hurt somebody else if you try this. So the safest thing for you to do is to avoid that activity completely. So that meant for me that I couldn't drive my car. I couldn't get on a bus. I couldn't get on a train or a plane. Um, which at the time, when I look back on it now, I can't quite believe that I had those parameters for my life. But at the time, I clearly remember thinking like, this is the safest thing for me to do. The safest thing for me to do is to deny myself access to these basic, like, travel, methods
Mhm.
of travel. Um, but again, it's like when those simple things that we take for granted are no longer available to you, everything else feels like a complete pipe dream. And it is the deep, deep sense of frustration that we experience with that, and sadness. I mean, I remember like grieving for the life that I wanted. I was like, I want to be a filmmaker. I want to direct movies. And it's just like, that's an overnight, that's gone. It's all gone.
Yeah, I remember I remember falling to my like the floor and just like crying and like just begging God, like, why me? Why me? Like I just cried. And I like you said, that just sense of sadness, like not being able to care for my son and not being able to leave my house. And if I did leave my house, like, I mean, I didn't, like, I did travel when I had it. Because I'd go back and forth from Kentucky to my mom's because I wasn't okay being alone. And I just remember like being on the airplane and just being completely disassociated and getting off the airplane and like losing myself in the airport, not knowing where I'm going and just feeling it was just a terrible, terrible experience. Mhm.
Yeah, yeah, it is quite brutal. And and again, Marian, I'm going to keep coming back to this question because I find it so interesting. But when you look back on that now that things are not just back to normal, but you're absolutely flourishing. But now that you look back on that, how do you think of it? Do you kind of look at it in terms of like, do you look back at it with a sense of kind of frustration about it or acceptance, or how does it feel looking back on it?
I look back at it like if honestly, and this is the God's honest truth of how I feel, I honestly feel that if I did not go through that, if I never went through my experience with DPDR, I would not be sitting here where I am today. I don't think that I definitely accept it. I feel like maybe, like, I know, I'm big on my faith, but I know God didn't make me go through that. Like, he didn't put me in that situation, but he helped me grow from that situation, if that makes sense. I definitely don't think that I would have accomplished all that I've accomplished today sitting here if I didn't go through that. I don't know. It's just hard to explain. But I can definitely say that if I did not go through it, I would not be where I am today for sure. It's changed me as a person. It's made me grow. It's made me, my whole mindset just completely different. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, yeah. And I know there's going to be people watching this now who think to themselves, "Well, oh, do you mean it changed you? Do you mean you're different because of it? Like how, because the big fear that we
In a
have
better,
is the future."
stronger way.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Just in a
Yeah,
better,
yeah,
stronger way. I mean, it made me a stronger person, 100%.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Me too. It's, and I know, again, I know this, that for anyone watching this, thinking to them, who's going through DP and DR, thinking to themselves, like, I would give anything to stop this right now. And I can't imagine that I would appreciate this experience. But when you recover from it, and you can and will recover, you look back on it with an awareness of how much stronger you are having gone through it. Um, because there really is no way to kind of understand an anxiety-based condition, not just EPDR, but going through something like intense social anxiety disorder, or obsessive compulsive disorder, or any anxiety-based condition. There's no real way to kind of understand it unless you've actually gone through it. But when you have gone through it, it does give you a sense of strength and an ability to navigate the world. And also, for me, a strong sense of empathy with other people that I just didn't have before. And I would have had a very, very cursory awareness of mental health. But I really just kind of, for me, I would have always thought, like, well, just, smile, be happy, you'll be fine. And then when DPDR hit me, it was like it had nothing to do with whether I was smiling or not, you know.
It's true. And that's so funny that you say that because I never, um, I never, I never had sympathy for people that went through, like, struggled with mental health. I guess I didn't believe it. I didn't believe it because I was never one to struggle with it. So, like, my sister, she struggles with her mental health. She's a recovering addict, and I look back, and it just, I have so much more sympathy. Like, if somebody's like withdrawing or coming off something, or just struggling with mental health in general, like, I can understand now. Like, I never understood how somebody could want to unalive themselves, right? So I would just be like, how could it, like, what in life could be that bad that you would want to do that to yourself? I'm sorry, there's nothing in life that could be that bad that would make you want to do that to yourself. That was my mindset, right? And now I look back and I'm like, most definitely there is, and I can completely understand and I can completely relate. And it made me more sympathetic for sure as a person. And this was actually one of my questions in my interview for being hired as a police officer. Like, why do I feel like I want to be a police officer, right? So a lot of police officers don't understand mental health, and they just assume that you're just a bad person, you're breaking the law, and they're just going to throw you in jail. There's not enough police officers out there that understand people that have mental health issues, right? So say you go to a call and somebody's struggling with a mental health issue, and the officer can't recognize it as a mental health issue, and they just throw them in jail. Well, that's like the worst thing you could possibly do for somebody struggling with mental health. So I feel like, in a sense, like, that's going to make me a stronger police officer as well. Like, I feel like I can relate more to different people.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think there's no field in which a sense of empathy is more valuable than in law enforcement. So that's really a really wonderful thing that you can bring to it. And certainly for myself as well. I mean, I never would have had any issues with like depression, or I mean, I would have had moments of anxiety, but never anything close to DPDR before the time that I experienced it. And and I remember at times feeling that I just desperately, desperately wanted the thoughts to stop, because it was just constant. It was like being on a roller coaster, like all the time, like first thing in the morning, and you're just like onto the roller coaster. And then I started having nightmares about it, in which I was like panicking and experiencing intense DPDR in my dreams. And I wake up into the anxiety and DPDR and constant catastrophic existential thoughts. It was a nightmare. And I remember thinking like I just so desperately want that to stop, you know? And that scared me a lot, because you know, it was never a thought that I ever believe I'd encounter, but there it was. But again, it is coming from a sense of frustration, and at that point, I didn't understand what was happening as well. But when I did put a name on it and find a label for it and find just how extremely common it is,
Mhm.
that started to give me a sense of purchase on it, a sense of control. Very, very slight. It didn't switch it off or anything. But once I understood that I could adjust this even slightly by playing a video game, or not researching it, for example, then I started to think, maybe I could actually get rid of this completely. Which this is all, you know, very simple terms of expressing the methods of cognitive behavioral therapy and acceptance and commitment therapy. You know, um, Marianne, looking back, was there a point at which you stopped trying to feel normal and instead focused on living?
Oh God, yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, definitely. It's gosh. So when did I start? I remember the day that I can remember the exact day that it hit me. Like the day that it was. So I got the migraine medicine January 15th of 22. I got a migraine cocktail, and inside the cocktail was a medication called droperidol, which is an antipsychotic. It's like the along the same lines as like Reglan or a Adderall or Composine, anything they give you for nausea, like when you're having a headache. I had a terrible reaction to that medication. Yeah. Yeah, and that reaction was July 15th, 2022. So I woke up with it July 16th of 2022. And so I would say I started living, I started not, like I still cared about it, but my mindset was like, I'm done with this and I'm going to go try to get a job. I started working, I want to say June 23. And then from that point on, I still had it pretty strong. I still had it really strong, but I just ignored it. I mean, it bothered me and I went home and I cried about it at night and stuff, but like I didn't, it, and it affected me, obviously, because like for me, I struggled with a lot of cognitive stuff like brain fog and remembering things. And so when I'm trying to do my job, I would forget a lot of things and I would struggle with like tasks that I had to do. But I didn't let it bother me. I just kept on living. I was just done with it. I was up for it. I was like, I'm not going to let this take my life anymore. About a year after my initial reaction to it is when I was just like, I'm done. And I still had all those thoughts, like while I was working, like this, like suicidal ideation and like the continuous like thoughts in my head of like going through like why I'm going through this, what like those repetitive thoughts in my head, they were still there and they weren't quieted any. But like you said, and even when I tried to distract, I would still think about it unless I was like really, really, really distracted. And then it would go away for a little while. Yeah. That I just I just kept living. Yeah. And I can remember the first time that, like, through all that time too, I didn't feel any excitement or I mean, my emotions were gone. I didn't feel anything. I couldn't feel love, couldn't feel excitement, couldn't feel happiness, joy. I just felt all the negative. Um, and I can remember the time that I first felt joy. And that was when I met my boyfriend in September 23. And that was like the first time that I felt happiness. So, and then from there, I just kept on going and going. And eventually I just didn't care. And it just eventually left. I mean, I don't, you know.
This is an experience that people will very often relate to me, and I experienced it myself, is that you get to a point with the anxiety and DPDR where you realize that constantly focusing on it and constantly trying to research it and kind of pick it apart and trying to find a power button to turn it off doesn't work. And so you find that you want to just try and do normal things again. And for me, that was getting to a point where I said, well, instead of reading another book about anxiety or reading another book about intrusive thoughts, I'd like to read The Lord of the Rings. You know, it's my second Lord of the Rings reference on this call, but there you go. And it moves the anxiety from being something that feels terrifying to something that's just kind of there. It's an annoyance. It's a point of frustration.
Mm-hmm.
And all these feelings and the thoughts and the existential questions and all that. Okay, they're there, but I'm just like, I'm sick of it. Like I'm gonna do something else. And it feels so strange to do that because the thoughts and the feelings feel like they demand your undivided attention. But it's your undivided attention that keeps them going. This is the basis of, habits of behavior and thought.
Mm-hmm.
And the distraction thing is really interesting. I've had, people ask me recently about, saying, does distraction really work? And the word, when you say does distraction work, it sounds very, very simplistic. What you're actually doing is refocusing. You're refocusing your attention. Refocusing your attention is one of the core techniques in cognitive behavioral therapy and acceptance and commitment therapy. It is absolutely integral to recovery from all anxiety-based conditions. And also, like, how could it not be? Because if you keep focusing on it, it keeps powering it, it keeps it going. When you research it, you feel, maybe a brief sense of relief, but it feels more intense after that.
Like a hamster wheel. Like it just goes and goes and goes. Yeah.
Exactly. It's a hamster wheel that just keeps going and going. The more that we focus on it, the more oxygen that we give the anxiety. And again, this isn't stuff that I came up with. I mean, in the DP manual, I've refined it for the symptoms of DP and DR because at the time when I wrote the first version of the book, there was almost no information about it. But these are techniques that have been proven to work over decades of clinical research in cognitive behavioral therapy, acceptance and commitment therapy. Again, it feels deeply counterintuitive when we do it first because it feels like it's demanding your attention. But in focusing your attention away from it, we start to take the oxygen away from the anxiety and also just to communicate gently to our brains that this isn't that important. It feels like a fire alarm going off, but there's no fire. It's actually not that important. So as you were saying, Marianne, when you start to focus your attention on other things, like, looking for a new job or being in a new relationship, it doesn't switch the anxiety or DPDR off, but it just starts to communicate to your brain that we can do other things. We don't have to be on this hamster wheel 24/7 anymore. And it just starts to slow down that feedback loop of anxiety and DPDR, and the recovery process begins and then starts to speed up.
Exactly. And it doesn't happen overnight. Don't think that you're just going to be like, okay, I'm going to go distract and your thoughts are going to be gone, because that's not how it works. Like you're going to distract and your thoughts are still going to be there, and it's not going to happen overnight. It's very gradual, and it's so gradual that you won't even know it's happening. And for me, that's how it was. Like it was so gradual that I didn't even notice the changes of it till I looked back and I was like, wow, I feel okay. You know what I mean? So it doesn't happen overnight, and it's not going to happen overnight. You're not going to wake up, distract, and you're going to be okay. That's not how it works.
No. But and the thing is, like, is that that's how what changing any habit looks like. change any habit, it never happens overnight. It's not like you've been doing something for a couple of months or a couple of years or whatever, and you make one change and overnight it's gone. That's not how habits work. And the way that we trip ourselves up is by expecting that. So what I used to do was I would find some technique online or something that I'd seen in a book or something. I would try that, and I would go to sleep, and the next morning I'd wake up and just check to see, did that work? But I changed my habit. Is it working? And it's like, no, like of course it's not going to happen that quickly. In the same way that if you change your diet, you wouldn't wake up the next morning going like, is my life completely different? It's like, no, of course it's not overnight, but like, give yourself the time. If you quit smoking, you don't wake up the next morning and never want a cigarette again. It's like you have to. It's great that you've made that milestone of the decision, but you now have to give yourself the time and the space for that pattern of behavior, the new pattern of behavior to solidify. It takes a bit of time, takes a bit of effort, but that's okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
One thing that's really helped me, and people are going to think like, why would you do that? I run. I love to run, and when I run, it just clears my head. Like it just makes me feel so much better. I can be having like the worst day and struggling, and because don't get me wrong, I still I don't struggle. I still struggle. Like, I mean, there's times where I'm still sad and where I still, you know what I mean? Get depressed at times. It's situational, obviously. It's not because I have DPDR. I mean, I have a tough life. My son's special needs. I'm a single mom. I raise him by myself. So when I do get in that headspace, like when I run, I can go to the gym, I can run, and I'll come back and I can just redirect my thoughts and everything, and it's okay again. You know what I mean? So.
Oh, 100%. That's fantastic. And, something that I always try to communicate to people as well is that recovery from DPDR and anxiety-based condition, it doesn't mean you're never going to feel anxiety or stress again, like, or moments of depression. Like, of course you are. Like, you're a human being. The example I always like to give is like somebody who struggles with heart palpitations from anxiety, and then they figure out what it is and why it's happening. And that's great. They have that knowledge and it doesn't turn into like a panic attack again. But does that mean that they're never going to experience heart palpitations ever again? Like, of course they are. Like, of course you're going to have stressful days at work. Of course you'll have a day where you didn't sleep the night before, you drink too much coffee, your heart palpitates. But in knowing what it is, you prevent it from spinning off into some catastrophic version of what is a perfectly normal momentary symptom of anxiety. It is normal and natural to feel moments of anxiety or stress from time to time. And that's an important thing to remember as part of the recovery process.
It is, definitely. I know what it is and I don't panic. And I'm like, okay. Or like if I get really tired, I can start to feel like just like not myself. And I'll just go to bed and I'll wake up the next day and I'll be fine. Like, I know the things like to do, like when I start feeling that way. And I know that it doesn't worry me anymore. It doesn't affect my life. And I know that just because I'm feeling that way in the moment doesn't mean I'm going to feel that way tomorrow, So yeah. Mindset's big. And like you said, like I did all the things like in that year trying to figure it out. Like I watched videos and I researched and you feel better for that 2 minutes that you watch that video thinking, okay, well, this is what I have and it's going to go away. But then 2 minutes later it comes back and you're like, okay, I'm back to that, that looping thought again. And I mean, I went to therapy. I did EMDR. I admitted myself into an institute, tried to get therapy. I tried medication, and at the end of the day, for me, none of that worked. I mean, it was just, I had to figure it out myself.
I hope you're enjoying Marianne's recovery story. Just a quick reminder that when you feel ready to start your recovery story, you can instantly download my step-by-step guide, the DP Manual. In this structured course, I will personally guide you through the entire DPDR recovery process with over 10 hours of video and audio not available on YouTube or anywhere else. It's completely digital and works on any device, including your phone and tablet. It's the same guide that Marianne used and everyone else in these recovery interviews. She recovered, they recovered, and when you feel ready, you can too. The link is in the video description. Now, back to the interview. we can often try a whole bunch of different approaches that can be sometimes somewhat helpful, but until we actually understand what's causing this, and really as well just how simple it is, and it feels strange to accept that because it feels like it's this massive, complicated cobweb of different symptoms and existential thoughts. And then when we learn that it's just anxiety, and there's a part of me that says this can't just be anxiety. This is something different. Like this is a dark night of the soul. This is an existential test. Like the universe is punishing me, or I'm in purgatory. I'm in a video game. I'm in a dream, and I can't wake up. And part of it,
I thought I got possessed. Because I went to Vegas and I stayed in a hotel. I stayed in the Rio in Vegas, and when I was in the hotel, I just got a terrible vibe. And then when I got back, that's like when everything started happening, and I was like, "Oh my God!" I just something attached itself to me, and like I'm like something's like, yeah, it was insane. The stuff I was thinking was just insane. It was insane.
it's so frightening when we have thoughts like that. And but what's really interesting is that when you look back on it, and I had thoughts like that too, certainly. But when I look back on it, when you're going through a feeling of intense disconnection from yourself and the world around you, coupled with racing, brutal existential thoughts, and you have no explanation for what's going on, couple that with the fact that with anxiety, our brains tend to jump to the absolute worst possible conclusions, regardless of evidence. Like, of course, you're going to be jumping to conclusions like, maybe I'm possessed. Maybe from one of my ones was maybe I died in a car crash and I can't remember it. Because, but the idea of me being like dead or in purgatory, like made as much sense to me as any other explanation, because I didn't have a better explanation until I came across the term depersonalization, derealization, and again, this is part of cognitive behavioral therapy, is putting the correct labels on things is so, so important. When you put a label on it and say, okay, this symptom you're experiencing, it's incredibly distressing. I understand that. But there's a reason for it. There's a very simple logical underpinning to it. And once you understand that, again, it doesn't switch it off in the moment, but it just starts to take the power away from it, because there's no longer this terrifying kind of mysterious thing that you can't figure out. It's like, oh no, when it has a name, it's actually really common. Most people will actually experience this from time to time. And 1 in 50 people will develop it as a condition at some point. Like, it's that common, right? And also, it's an anxiety-based condition, and 1 in 3 people will develop an anxiety-based condition. They're the most common things in the world. Putting those labels on it just starts to take the power back from it, slowly but surely. But it's a very important part of the recovery process.
It's definitely.
Yeah. Marianne, a very common worry that people have with DPDR is that their case is different or more severe than everybody else's. Is that something that you went through? And what would you say now to people watching this who feel that same way?
Of course I went through that. I went through like not believing that I actually had DPDR, that I had something completely different. That was big for me. Like, what if it is not DPDR? What if, what if, what if? Um, my case was really severe. I mean, if you go back and watch my videos and you listen to the symptoms that I had, it was pretty bad. I mean, I struggled with everything under the sun. I mean, everything you could possibly struggle with when you have DPDR. And at the end of the day, no matter what symptoms you struggle with, whether you struggle with more or less than another person, it doesn't make anything different. It's all your nervous system and it's all DPDR. And at the end of the day, everybody's the same. So your condition is not any worse than somebody else's. It may feel that way for you because your life is shattering before you know it, but you could ask somebody who has less symptoms how they feel, and say somebody didn't struggle with all the same symptoms that I did, but they still feel that theirs was super severe like I did, So at the end of the day, everybody's the same. I mean, regardless of what they're struggling with.
Yeah,
Mhm.
certainly. The nature of anxiety is that, again, jumping to the worst possible conclusion. So it always feels like the one you have is the worst version of it, and possibly the worst that anyone has ever had. Nobody ever developed an anxiety-based condition and thought to themselves, this isn't too bad. I actually thought this would be worse.
Yeah, right.
Right? It's never ever happened. The nature of it's the example I always like to give is like, take somebody who has 10 panic attacks over the course of a month. It's not like by the time they get to panic attack number 10 that they're saying to themselves, this is all right. I mean, panic attack 4 now was the bad one, but this is actually, I managed this. I'll be grand.
No.
Every panic, yeah, it doesn't happen that way. Every panic attack feels like, this is the one that's going to kill me. This is the one that's going to drive me crazy. This is the one that I'm not going to come back from, even though if you may have had 9 panic attacks previous that month, it doesn't matter. The nature of anxiety is that it's trying to save your life. It's trying to get you away from danger. And the way that it does that is by suggesting that you are in the worst danger possible, regardless of the data that surrounds it. But certainly, I mean, I was absolutely convinced that mine was different. I had a different version of it. I thought I had DPDR 2.0. I thought I had quote unquote extreme depersonalization.
Yeah.
That's and the big worry that people have is that, like, there's a line that they have somehow crossed that they can't come back from. So even if they'll see other people who have recovered, and they'll say, okay, but they mustn't have had it too bad, like, but mine's different. Mine was really bad, and my worry is that I've crossed this line that no one else has. Or even that the people who have recovered, they'd never really had it that bad in the first place.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. A lot of people think that way. Oh, but I can assure you that's not the way it is. It's not.
No.
I mean, everybody's time frame's different, obviously. And I guess how you handle it is different. How everybody handles it is different, And I honestly, I feel like the approach that you take now, looking back, like the approach you take to handle it is what is going to help you. And I don't know if that makes any sense to you, but like,
100%. The whole thing is how you handle it. Like, when people talk about, like, but why did this person have it for like 3 weeks, and then this person had it for 3 years?
exactly.
It's not because there's different types of DPDR that last longer. It's because of how they handled it, and
Exactly.
and how they handle it can often be based on how long it takes them to find the correct information. So when I say I had it for 2 years, what I'm actually saying is that I got the condition, and for almost 2 years, I didn't know, I didn't have the correct information. I didn't know what to do about it. I was trying all these different techniques that were ineffective, that were counterintuitive. I researched it constantly. I was obsessed with it. I stopped working. I moved home. And then when I started doing the correct things to recover, which felt, again, deeply counterintuitive, that's what started the recovery process to happen. All that it is it takes people different amounts of time to get there, to find that correct information.
Absolutely.
So yeah, so you see someone on Reddit saying, I've had this for 5 years. One of the reasons they've had it for 5 years is because they're on Reddit talking about it all the time. And
Exactly.
no judgment, by the way. I was that person for 2 years on the forums, constantly talking about it, and then wondering why at night I couldn't stop thinking about it, having spent the whole day researching it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree 100%. Mhm.
Marianne, is there anything that you used to constantly check or obsess over during DPDR that you don't think about at all now?
Oh yeah. A big thing that I used to check is, so I had the feeling that I was stuck behind my eyes. I don't know, like I don't know how to explain it. I just felt like I don't know. I felt like I was just stuck behind my eyes. So I would constantly check to see if I had that feeling constantly. Um that was one of the biggest things I used to do. Like, I just used to check my symptoms all the time, a million times a day, and they were still there. They never went away until I stopped checking, like I just eventually stopped checking. I did. I checked every symptom. Like, am I still having these thoughts? Am I still having anxiety? Am I like that anxiety feeling? Do I still feel like when I'm driving, I'm stuck behind my eyes, or when I'm home? Like, oh God, I checked every symptom every single day. I mean, it was just continuously. And I would just talk about it and talk about it and talk about it. And I just dwelled on it for so long.
Yeah.
Mhm.
A question that people often ask me, and I see this on the comments a lot, is how on earth am I supposed to distract or refocus my attention away from these symptoms when they are everywhere and they're in my vision and they're in my thoughts? Like, they are in my thoughts. How on earth am I supposed to start to recover from this if this is constantly in my awareness?
I want to say there's stages. Like, you get to the initial stage where you're like, oh my God, what's happening to me? Right. And then you do your research and you figure out it's DPDR. And then you get to the stage where you're at the worry stage, where you feel like, oh my God, I'm never going to get better. Like you said, like, oh, my symptoms are worse. My DPDR is worse than everybody else. I'm never going to heal. And I can watch all these videos and I can talk to all these people, but they're not the same as me. So you'll struggle. So each stage you'll struggle for a certain amount of time, right? And then you get to out of the worry stage and you get to the frustrated, pissed off stage, right? And you're just like, I'm just tired of this taking over my life, but there's still some worry there, but you're still frustrated and angry with it, right? And then you're stuck in that stage for a certain amount of time. And then when you're stuck in that stage for a certain amount of time, you just move on to the phase where you just don't care. Like, you're just like, I'm not going to this is how it worked for me anyway. I'm just like, I'm not going to let this take over my life. I have too much going for me. I'm already in my 40s, so I'm not going to let this take any more of my life. Like, I'm just going to move on. And if it's there, it's there. And if it's not, it's not. And that's how it worked for me. I basically went from like one state, like the beginning stage, to like the end stage. And I just didn't care anymore. Does that make sense to you?
Very much. Yeah, very, very much so. Um, it's important to remember that ultimately what we're doing is we are reducing our levels of anxiety over time. So DPDR and all the symptoms that come with DPDR are themselves symptoms of anxiety. So they reduce and fade away, including the hyper awareness of the symptoms, the
Mm-hmm.
safer awareness of the thoughts, catastrophic interpretations, all reduce and fade away as the recovery continues. Um, I like to I think of it as training. You're training yourself away from one habit of thought and behavior and into another. And when we say like, oh, but these symptoms are so intense, like I can see them, I can feel them all the time. And the analogy I like to give is like, let's say it's after Christmas and you've put on a couple of pounds, right? As I certainly did, right? And you say, okay, I'm going to go to the gym. I'm going to work off the pounds, right? So I'm going to get on the treadmill a couple of nights a week. I'm going to eat right during the day, and I'm going to make that change. And it's like walking up to the treadmill and then like looking down at like a roll of fat and saying, this is still here, and then getting on the treadmill and doing one session on the treadmill and then saying, but it's still here. The symptom itself isn't important. What's important is the training that you do to get rid of the symptom.
Exactly.
Yeah, you can't switch off anxiety in the same like you can't switch off anxiety in the moment. There's no power button for it. In the same way that you can't like just immediately get rid of some extra weight, but you train yourself out of it. And you have to be a bit patient with it and consistent with it. But like instead of getting frustrated that you can't turn it off in the moment, what you can do is you'll see small incremental improvements as the training continues. And if you can expect that, instead of being frustrated that, but will I wake up tomorrow morning? I hope it's not there. that gives you a lot more grace, and it gives you a lot more compassion with yourself, and allows you the time and space for those incremental changes to build up, and the pattern of habit and behavior to change completely. But it's very important to give ourselves that space.
It's like you have to put in the work and you have to be disciplined. It's basically, like overcoming DPDR is basically like going to the gym as your New Year's resolution because you want to lose weight, and putting in the work and being disciplined and dedicated. It's basically the same concept. I mean, like, you're not going to go to the gym, like you said, and lose that fat roll in a day or two. It's going to take a month or 2 months or 3 months or however long it takes to lose it. And while you're putting in the work, and the same goes for DPDR. You're not going to distract one day and think that you're going to wake up the next day and you're going to be okay, because it's not. It doesn't work that way.
No. And the thing is that, like, it's you can always recover from this. It's always harmless and temporary, but we trip ourselves up by expecting immediate results, and then saying, oh no, I have to go back to the drawing board because that thing didn't cure this immediately. And it's like, no, you're training yourself out of it. To go back to the gym analogy, the other thing that people do, and I certainly did, is we trip ourselves up by bringing like belief and doubt into it. So you people might look at this interview, for example, and say, okay, well, Marianne recovered and good for her, but I just don't believe I can recover. I just don't believe that what worked for her will work for me. I don't trust that I have that ability in myself. It's the same thing again as, wanting to lose a bit of weight, walking up to the treadmill, stopping at the treadmill and saying, I just don't think this is going to work for me. I just don't believe that that I have the ability to carry this through. And it's just like, get on the treadmill. Just get on the treadmill. You're tripping yourself up by bringing belief and doubt into it. What I always say to people is, it doesn't matter if you believe it or not. Like, your doubt and belief doesn't matter. If you train yourself out of this, it will work. It works every time. It can't not work. Like, you can't not recover, because you're reversing the process that caused this to happen in the first place. When we bring like belief and doubt into it, we're setting up these like unnecessary tripwires, like on our path to recovery. When we should just be on the treadmill, training ourselves out of this.
Mm-hmm. I agree. You're setting yourself up. You set yourself up for failure with the doubt and the worry. I mean, it's just like, and it's in any example in life, really. Like for me to pass these physical fitness tests for like the police academy, like, I had doubt that I was not going to be able to say we have to run 300 meters in 65 seconds. Like, that was a big struggle for me. And I kept telling myself over and over in my head, I'm not going to be able to do it. I'm not going to be able to do it. I'm not going to be able to do it. Obviously, if you're telling yourself that, you're not going to be able to do it. So you have to set that doubt aside, and you just have to try, and bam, you'll run the 300 meters in 65 seconds. You know what I mean? It's like, it's just with anything in life, not just with DPDR. It's just, you have to set yourself up for success, not just failure.
Do you think that social awareness of DPDR has changed in the time since you've had it?
Honestly, I don't. I don't. I mean, when I try to tell people about my story, they look at me like I have 12 heads. I honestly don't. I think it's not recognized enough still. I think you do a great job bringing awareness to it. And when I talk about it, I always refer back to you. Like, if you don't believe me, this is what you go watch these videos, go. But no, I really don't think so. Like, do you think so? What do you think? I don't think so.
Well, so because I speak to so many people with the Zoom coaching, I do get a lot of insight into people's experiences of speaking to medical health professionals,
Mm-hmm.
because obviously one of the first steps for anyone who develops a condition like this or any anxiety-based condition is they go and speak to their GP,
Therapist.
speak to their
Yeah.
therapist, their therapist, their doctor, or whatever. And it is becoming more common that they will describe their symptoms to their doctor or therapist, and the doctor or therapist will say that's called depersonalization, derealization. Now, it's not very common. It's certainly nowhere near where it needs to be, but it's more common, definitely more common than it used to be, because back in the day, nobody would get that actual diagnosis. I think there's a couple of reasons for that. One is, honestly, one of them is the legalization of weed in the States. Because it's such a common trigger for the condition, that the upswell in cases of it has just kind of had this like trickle down effect into the medical community, where there's people are presenting with these symptoms after a bad experience with weed or an edible or something, that the awareness is coming from that. Also, there's been a couple of like famous people who've discussed it. Post Malone has talked about it. Bowen Yang from Saturday Night Live had an experience with DPDR and anxiety, and spoke quite openly about it too. It was referred to in a Netflix special, Bo Burnham's Inside, and was then Phoebe Bridgers did a song about it. So it is kind of trickling into culture a lot more than it used to. But I emphasize the word trickle. Like it's very slow. It's very slow.
Well,
It's not where it needs to be.
you like you said, you talk to a lot of people. You follow. Like I can say for like I don't think about it anymore. I don't go and I don't talk to people about it. Like unless somebody comes to me, like I explained earlier, like if somebody reaches out to me and I talk about my experience, that's one thing. But I don't go spread awareness like you do, and I don't talk to anybody really. I mean, my circle is very small, very, very small. I have like two friends and my son and my family. So I I don't, I mean, maybe it is, but like, I guess so. I guess I should just kind of go back. I guess maybe it has in a sense for somebody who follows it. But for me, like, I don't believe in therapists. And this is so terrible. It's like, I don't believe in therapists and doctors. I just feel like all they want to do is throw medication at you. And so I try to stay away from them. So I don't go to a psychiatrist anymore. I don't go, yeah, I don't, I try to stay away from medical professionals
Yeah.
unless I really have to, you know, like,
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah.
I think that this I can understand that position based on the experience you had, Marianne. It was, yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
I mean, what happened to you was, and anyone who's watching the video could go back and watch the previous two interviews. But I mean, what happened to you was, I mean, it was frustrating for me to hear about it, from a
Yeah.
distance, and with much time passed. I do think that a lot of the frustration that people have with the medical health profession in terms of specifically a condition like DP and DR, I do try to remember that, like, it's not coming from a place um of kind of dismissal, or uh it's not coming from a place of dismissal on the part of the doctors, but it's just that they're not informed enough about it. For example, like, so if for example you and I had, instead of developing DP and DR, had developed, let's say, agoraphobia specifically, or obsessive compulsive disorder, both of which are very, very common and very, very difficult anxiety based conditions to go through. But they're also much more quickly identified, and they have very clear courses of recovery that are established in the medical community. Um, so had we got developed those instead, you might have gone to your doctor. You probably would have gone to your doctor, and the doctor said, "Okay, well, Marianne, that's called agoraphobia, really
Yeah.
common condition. Here's a path out of it." Um, it just so happens that the awareness of DPDR isn't where it needs to be with those. So I do try to remember that like, and also I've spoken to medical health professionals on this channel who have gone through DPDR.
Yes, I do. I remember. Yeah, I remember some of the videos. Yes, yes, I do. I remember some of those.
Yeah, and these are like trained medical health professionals who have a panic attack, develop DPDR, and nobody seems to be able to help them. So yeah, hopefully we'll get to a place sooner rather than later where the awareness of it is at a place where anyone around the world could walk into a doctor's office, describe their symptoms, and the doctor says, "You're okay." That's called depersonalization, derealization. It's harmless and temporary. It's not going to switch off immediately, but here's a pamphlet. Here's a path.
Yeah,
Here's some
here's
exposure.
the direction that you can take to fix it. Exactly.
Exactly. That was the thing for me, was that, like, I I mean, I wanted an immediate solution, but even if I hadn't gotten an immediate solution, it just took me so long to be pointed in the right direction for just to be like, well, what do I do? I give, for example, when I first got the condition, I felt really sleepy and dreamy all the time. So I thought, well, what do I do when I feel sleepy and dreamy? I drink coffee to wake myself up. So I was hammering into, like,
Caffeine. Yeah.
caffeine throughout the day to try and wake myself up. But I didn't know what to do. And that was the start of, like, a litany of bad decisions that I made to
I
try and
still don't drink caffeine.
really,
I won't touch it. I won't
really.
touch it. I refuse to touch it. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Well, not me. Yeah.
No, I mean, I always want to like try it every once in a while, but I'm like, nope, not worth it. Nope. I
Yeah,
don't want to
fair
try it.
enough.
Yeah.
Marianne, what advice would you not give to somebody with DPDR? Something that actually kept you in the condition longer than you needed to, looking back.
Well, the first bit of advice I would give is once you figure out what you have, stop looking, stop Googling, stop. I mean, watching videos is one thing. Like watching successful videos is one thing, and like people who have come out of it, like your videos are wonderful. But like you said, going on Reddit and talking to people who have been in it for 10 years who you don't know how they've tried to help themselves, like avoid that. Completely avoid that. I like I said, I was guilty of doing it for a year. Um, and then the next bit of advice I would give was just be like, don't stop living your life. Like as uncomfortable it is as it is for you, and as comfortable as you're going to feel, just do the things that you want to do and that you need to do, because if you stay stuck in that mindset that you're going to isolate and think that it's going to get better for you, it's not going to. I mean, you really just have to keep living your life, and as hard as and uncomfortable as it is, you just got to keep doing it. And I will say, like, I through the whole time I had it, like obviously it waxed and waned, so it was bad the whole time, but there were days that were more stressful than others, I should say. So like it waxed and waned, waxed and waned. Um, but I won't dismiss how terrible it was, because it was bad the whole time. But there were days that I felt like I could get up and drive. I would never go by myself, but there were days that I could like get up and drive to the store. But then there were days that I couldn't leave my mom's side. You know what I mean? So, but all at the same time, I have to say I never stopped. Like I still traveled on planes and I still, let me see. I still worked with my horses even though it was uncomfortable. And I still, even though I didn't go out and venture to like barrel races or do things like that, I still did things close to home, even though I was uncomfortable. Um, but I mean, my advice is to just keep living. Don't keep checking your symptoms, because they're going to be there till you decide you don't care anymore.
What does a normal day look like for you now, Marianne, in ways that would have been impossible during DPDR?
Oh gosh, my days are so full. So I have a son, he's special needs. So when I wake up, we wake up at 7 most days, and I get him on the bus, and then these since I've been trying to, get into police academy and stuff, the first thing I do in the morning is I go to the gym. I go to the gym and then spend 2 hours at the gym, and then I'll come home, and I have a lot. I'm in school full time online, so my full-time school is a lot. So I'll come home and I'll do school, and I'll wait for him to get off the bus, and then I'll just do mom things like cook dinner, talk about school, whatever he needs, pretty much. I mean, I'm just a mom. I'm a mom trying to be successful. So that's my day. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And all stuff that would have been so
Like
difficult.
completely impossible. I couldn't take care of my son. My son did not live with me for 2 years. He lived with my mom. Like I couldn't take care of him.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like for me to be able to take care of him, it's just great, you know.
And for me too, I mean, I when I got DPDR, I had to move home with my parents.
Hmm.
I couldn't take care of myself.
Hmm.
I stopped eating. I stopped sleeping. I absolutely couldn't work. I was a full-time musician at the time. I was playing
Hmm.
music and also in bars and weddings and stuff like that. And I mean, it literally became impossible overnight to do that. And so, yeah, but it's so wonderful to see the difference between, because again, one of the concerns that people have, I know this is one of the big themes of this conversation. I think it's so important, is that for someone going through DP and DR, the the difficulty of the condition and the harshness of the symptoms, and because of how small it can make your world, it feels impossible to even dare to believe that you could get back to normal. Because people will say, but like I can't even remember what being normal felt like. How could I ever get back there? I can't even remember like traveling and taking care of my son and going for a new job, like, and you know,
Yeah. You don't really remember what normal feels like till you're normal again. If that makes sense. Like, I mean, that's just how it was for me. Like, and you asked about checking, like I'd kept checking to see if I felt normal, right? So what's normal? Like you don't really know what's normal till you're actually just living your life, right? So for me, I like you said, I didn't know I forgot what normal felt like. And then just not one day I woke up, but gradually I gradually just got back to normal, and normal was normal again, and then you remember, oh, well, this is normal.
Marianne, if someone watching this interview is convinced they'll never feel like themselves again, what would you want them to understand about patience and recovery? People might be watching this thinking, well, you've like can people really recover, or are they just like pushing away the symptoms temporarily? You know, is it actually possible to really recover?
Yeah, absolutely. It's possible. Like I'm an example, completely an example. And like I've accomplished so much since I've been better. Um, I just you just like all we talked about earlier in the video is you have to be patient, and you have to put in the work, and you have to be disciplined, and understand that it's not going to happen overnight. And just know that in time, as you just start to live your life again, that you're going to feel normal again, and you're going to be happy again, and you're going to feel all those feels because it is temporary. You know what I mean? Regardless of if it happened for somebody in 3 weeks and it happened for somebody in 3 years, at the end of the day, the outcome's the same if you put in the work and be patient. So, definitely, you're definitely going to be normal again. You're definitely going to heal, and don't think that you're not, because I am just, I'm just, I am just an example, because I never in my whole life ever thought that at my age I would be where I am ever. And neither did anybody around me. My family was just like in utter shock. So,
Yeah, yeah. Not like, recovery isn't, I mean, recovery is 100% getting back to normal, 100%.
mhm.
But also, you are an example of how you can also just go from strength to strength afterwards, and
Yeah. And like I told you earlier, I'm happy I went through it. Like I am very thankful that I went through it. and as horrible as it was, as I was going through it, and I honestly didn't think I would make it out alive. Like I literally thought it was the end of my life. Like I I'm grateful that I went through it. Like I told you earlier, because I don't think that if I didn't go through it, I would be where I am today. I would have just settled for a mediocre life, and I wouldn't have wanted to be successful. So I really think that it changed my mindset, and I really feel like it was a life lesson for me. And I'm honestly super thankful. I really am super thankful for it.
Mm. Uh, Marianne, if you could go back and tell your DPDR self one sentence, what would it be?
Um, it would just be like, girl, look at you now. Like look at you. You're not gonna recognize yourself 2 years from now, you know? Like you're gonna just it's just your life is gonna change, you know? This is there's all a purpose in this, basically. You know, there's a purpose behind this. So that's what I would tell myself. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. As difficult as it is when you're going through it, and it is
Mhm.
brutally, brutally difficult. At times, I remember feeling like I didn't know it was possible for a human being to be as frightened as I was, or how it just felt impossible to go through it. But once you're through it, and everyone can get through it, and everyone can recover, regardless of what caused it, regardless of how long it lasted, you can and will recover. And when you do, you will look back on it, and the sense of experience and strength that you have gained from it will stand to you for the rest of your life. And if you like, you can take that strength and that experience and point it into a new career, a,
Absolutely.
a new vocation, a new relationship, whatever you want, you know. Marianne, it has been so lovely to speak with you again. And it's so good to have um, another conversation with someone who's got that experience of time and distance between their recovery and seeing what their life is like post recovery. And again, this is the proof that you can recover from this. You can recover 100%, and it's long term, complete recovery with your life completely back to normal. Not just back to normal, but finding new passions and vocations and throwing yourself into those with all the passion and optimism that you can muster. Okay.
Absolutely.
Um, yeah. So thanks again, Marianne. And listen, we might talk again in a few years.
Yeah, right.
looking,
For sure.
I'm looking forward to it. It's great to chat with you again. Take care.
You too.